All right, so I'm going to just be doing my brakes. I went to the dealership for a checkup, and they said I needed new rear pads and rotors. They charged me, or they quoted me $550. So I'm doing them myself. I got the rotors for $45 each, and then the pads I think 35 or 40. I got ceramic pads. So I'm just going to do the job. I'm going to show any other Jeep guys who've never done their brakes how easy it is, and you should never, unless you don't have the time, you should never pay the dealership to do your brakes. Okay, just quick tools you're going to need. You may or may not need that hammer. You're going to need a crowbar to pull off the rotor. You're going to need a socket wrench, preferably one with an extension so it can long so you can break the bolts. 2 sockets. I'm not sure what size, but you can figure that out. I've got this little pry thing and a wrench. That's all you need for the job.
And an assistant.
All right, so you can use a tool like this. This will save a step, but you got to push this caliper back so the new brakes will fit, because the new brakes are going to have more thickness than the used ones. So a guy showed me this trick once. You just suppress the caliper as far back as you can get it, and that way it'll save you a step down the road. Okay, and we release the caliper. This is a lot easier than trying to keep the caliper on and put the brakes on. So I would recommend doing this first. Take that out. All right, so this is the caliper. See, I've got it suppressed now. We're going to use some brake cleaner and lube before we put the new brakes on here to clean that. You're just going to set that out of the way up here. Now what's next is to remove the brake mount, and that's going to take a little bit bigger bolt. Okay, so this bolt is pretty tight, so it helps if you have a long arm wrench. This one I personally have kind of adjust. So you're going to need a long arm wrench because these bolts are on pretty tight. You got to give it a good push, and then it should just release real quick, and then you can just use your finger once it's released. And there's 2 bolts back here for that. Take that off. So that bolt's off there. And then the bottom one I'll get off by hand. That one's off. And there's our brakes. You can see they're pretty worn. I'm not going to take them out until I get them all cleaned, but yeah, they are. Actually, this one's not as worn. We probably had some more time, but this was definitely coming out on the brakes, so we'll clean those. Okay, so next is to remove this rotor. I recommend using should use some brake cleaner. My Jeep's 2 years old, so the rotor is not yet rusted, but if you have an older Jeep, sometimes the rust here will oxidize and it forms like a glue, so it's hard to get these off sometimes. That's why I use the crowbar. Put it right here. Kind of work it around. So you get the rotor off. It should come right off.
And your assistant can exercise while she's in between helping you.
Yep. So you can see the brakes here. Come up here and show the brakes. You don't need to zoom in. So you can tell these probably still had another, I don't know, 3-6 months worth of life before they really were torn up, but you know, the dealer recommended I had new ones, and so anyway, here's the new brake and old one, just so you can see the difference. And I always recommend, before you take these out of the brake slot, keep them in so you don't forget, because it's real tricky. It's easy if you don't do this all the time. It's real easy to kind of forget how these, you know, which brake mounts in where. And so to save you time, just be a little more methodic before you pull these out to put the new ones in. Before we do that, we're going to grease up the sides of here and on the back of here for the brakes. Okay, so once you get the brakes in, you just slide them right back. It should easily slide in. If you got to force it, then they're not in right. And I usually try to squeeze the brakes just to keep them, but you just want to line them back to the hole here. Yeah, right there, and then get the bolts and hand crank everything. Tighten in one, get it started. Always do it by hand. And then you put this in, get it started. And this is much easier than taking the calipers off still attached to the brake. Trust me on that. That's all I can say. Some people will say you don't need to do these 2 steps, but this is so much easier to do it this way, and it's not much more extra time. Arm here, give it a couple tighten. So over here, we've got, you can see how the brakes are in. The brake mount is mounted. Now we're going to put in the caliper. Here, this is the caliper. We need to probably clean it a little bit, grease it up. I'm going to clean it with some brake cleaner, and then I'm going to put some grease here, and then we'll mount this back on in a second. All right, see you in a second. You know, I did the trick earlier on pushing this back with this tool here, but sometimes it doesn't get it all the way back. And so if that's the case, you can use one of these little C-clamps. You just put it like so, and then you just squeeze it, and it'll squeeze it in to where you can get the caliper back on. The other thing is you want to make sure that your brake line isn't twisted. Sometimes when you put this up here out of the way, it can get twisted. So make sure it's twisted. I mean, it's straight, and then you just insert it. Also, you want to lube this up with some grease. Usually the brake people, when you buy new brakes, they'll give you this stuff, so you just want to lube everything that's going to touch the brakes on here. So I'll do that real quick. I'm just going to stick some here, stick some around here. You can put some on the brake shoes themselves, brake pads, and then there we go. You want to push this in here. That's pushed in already. Push this in. Just again, hand tighten the bolts on the top there, and then on the bottom, do the same. Now they're hand tightened, and then taking off the caliper first saves a lot of headaches in trying to get those brakes squeezed back in there. And it's real easy, makes the job a lot easier doing that extra step. And then if you want a little bit extra boost, get an extender, gives you a little more torque in there. Okay, it's a little tight, pull that out. There we go, we got that tight. Sure, this one's tight. They're pretty good. And now we got our brakes on. The last step is to pump the brakes. I don't need to show that. You just pump them until they fit again. I am not a mechanic. I've got a desk job. It took me about an hour and a half per brake to do the rotors and the brake pads. So 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon, and saved me some money. So you can save that $500 and put it towards other Jeep parts. Hope you found the video helpful. Later.